Swears, just like any other thing, word, concept, anything that has meaning, is ultimately, well, are, because I said plural, swears are nothing else than a coping mechanism for this, well, let's say, world. Now, what is a coping mechanism and what is basically meaning? Now, ever since we started embracing, on the evolutionary scale, the idea of consciousness and awareness more and more, we also realized that a more intricate, a broader, um, let's say, communication aspect is required. Therefore, in time, different types of writing and different types of speaking have been created. These, of course, have become very useful. People have identified with them. However, that becoming slowly and surely a problem. Nowadays, we have so many languages, and well, a lot of the words people don't seem to really remember what they really mean, or they just use them unconsciously, or simply said, ignorantly. Now, ignorance is the best coping mechanism because it separates you from your own pain. When you are separated from your own pain, the point is you won't feel literally anything, so you're gonna live in the sense that, well, nothing bad can happen to you. You don't feel anything bad, but the point is this will have you live like an animal. You will live just on impulse, and the first impulse to come to you most likely will be the first action you will also take, which basically means discharging your discernment. Now, if you give up your discernment, technically you're nothing else than a machine because, well, the discernment is what makes the greatest difference in between humans and animals. Now, the point is, as with literally everything, when ignorance becomes so important, people will also need more and more survival mechanisms. Because, as I've been saying, ignorance is nothing else than a tool to survive. Ignorance means survival level. And when survival level is concerned, everything is important for the survival of the individual. This also includes the sacrificing of others. Well, of course, not necessarily physically, but, well, one will go to the extent of not caring about other people's emotions or anything else when it comes to their own defense. One of these tribulations of life, let's say, is the aspect of swearing. Now, not only are swears low vibrational aspects that have a karmic influence and they will come back to you sooner or later, one thing that people so easily create this, negative karma, especially through raging in video games and as such, the point is, these swears are nothing else than again a coping mechanism. In a great push against, free speech, as of what I personally see, so many more and more words are constantly being pushed into, being taken as, curse words, right? Or swears. Why? Because the point is, the more and more narcissistic and sociopathic this world becomes due to abuse and, well, worse than that, embracing of abuse, because people love being abused and it's always been like that. It's been like this for so many thousands of years because ultimately when you feel powerless against society and its ruling forces, you'll embrace ultimately hopelessness, which is kind of what shouldn't ever happen, and most likely you will start, manifesting that syndrome, right? Stockholm syndrome, in which you make part with the torturer, let's say, so that they leave you alone. But this also means giving up your own existence, giving up own freedom. Now, the point of curse words is, as people become more and more narcissistic and or sociopathic, which is deeply ingrained, let's say, in society as is, and in even our DNA, the point is their ego is so much more fragile. And you can see that easiest in video games and toxic Reddits. Okay, where people, you can't say literally anything about even a concept that is irrelevant to the majority of people, but is highly important to them. They will even die for. That's how the intellect works. When you identify yourself with something, the intellect is an ancient machine, or let's call it an ancient construct, whose purpose is to defend your beliefs with its own life. This is a very deep principle of manipulation because once you identify yourself with something, you become so ingrained into that that you're going to or willing to die for that. That is why you have people who would even die for their waifus or all so many concepts. And this is a very real fact. This is not something that I show as problematic. It is a problem in society, but I'm not pointing it necessarily as a problem or something that people should be judged for. This is just a problem and it needs to be addressed in a sensitive way. Because ultimately, each and all of these meanings, right, they're nothing else than a coping mechanism. And when narcissistic people don't get what they need, they will use also many triggers, right, against people to obtain what they want. So they will use all sort of strategies, and one of them includes, not allowing you to simply say so many things that they regard as swears. And again, most likely they will hunt you down and swear you down as well, because, well, if you mess with such minds, well, they will want you to suffer at least 1,000 times more. So the point about swears is just they are just nothing else than a meaning, right? Nowadays, if you say the N word, so many people, of black color, right, black skinned colored people, they have suffered so much, and to many of them, the N word is still a highly toxic and dangerous word. But the only problem does exist in them, not in the ones uttering the word. Because the point is, they have attributed so much negative meaning to that. Technically, it is their own karma. Because they have created a cycle in which they just keep verifying, right? It's just like in programming. In order for something to occur in a video game, like for example your character to move one step, there is an event that repeats itself so many times per second to see if the player has pressed any of the movement, right? Any of the directional keys. This is how meaning also works. There is a process that is created, especially through repetition, right? That is why school and so many other occult constructs of society work based on repetition, advertisements and the such, right? If you piss the brain off, it will embrace ignorance because by repeating things several times, it's enough that you have created a repetitive cycle in the unconscious mind, a repetitive cycle that will go on and on. That is why mainstream music is hard to forget, certain advertisements are hard to forget. And well, what you learn in school, usually the traumas, they are hard to forget because of ignorance. These only work against ignorance. Now, the point about swears, right? We see more and more that due to so-called community guidelines, people can't do or say much nowadays because you will always hurt the fragile ego of someone, right? And that is not a very good point because people already use shyness as an excuse to not communicate with others and not do anything, right? Shyness is nothing else than a pathetic excuse. Of course, it might piss some people off to hear this, but ultimately the truth will always set people free, but most likely it will piss them off first. So the point about meaning is, it is only a tool of control. The problem is, most people are using this for a bad control over themselves. They give so much meaning to annoying things that, well, they suffer the consequences. Because ultimately, swears and the such are coping mechanisms. You use them to, counteract, to fight back maybe, but that means you're just in survival mode. When you are in survival mode, you are the easiest to control. That is why survival mode is used as a great powerful tool by society. Why? Because keeping people poor and, well, a hunger is being staged now, and it's been staged for several months because people who control the world will obviously use every means to simply show the population, the ones who really have the control, but, well, they will always seek to show the population that technically they would be the ones in control. However, society needs to just wake up from this poisonous, flood of meanings, right, that they take. Because all that society is simply created by us people. Because we people create and give power to all the, corporations that exist and all the authorities and, political regimes that exist. So the point about meaning is, it is easily used as a means of control because usually meaning is used to annoy you, right? Now, many people would ask, but how? Well, let's not pretend that we play this ignorance game that longer, right? How is meaning used to control you? Well, it's very easily used, right? It's always that your things that you like, they are now prohibited, right? You're no longer allowed to go out, you're no longer allowed to do this, you're no longer even allowed to breathe. You're no longer allowed to use your discernment. Well, not that many people would use it anyway, but with people waking up, the point is, well, discernment will be more and more important. The information that you would really require is not displayed to you, right? Or, of course, something that you really know is slowly being denaturated, because by controlling the truth, right, in between commas, that you deliver people, you also control their beliefs. And belief means accepting things without the necessity for proof. Belief only exists in ignorance, just like religion and the need for authorities, right? That's only ignorance, because it's running away from responsibilities. It's running away from that of who you are and from your own center of power, right? And of course, that always comes with the punishment. And the punishment, in between the inverted commas, right? The punishment is that you'll always have a lack of power. You'll always have a sense of uselessness. And that also comes with the perverted part of that, right? The madness part of it, expectation that others will do your work, right? Because that is what narcissistic and sociopathic behaviors in a certain way represent. A will for others to do their bidding, right? It is somewhat based on control. So the point about meaning is, don't use this as a poison against you, right? Because he who angers you controls you. This is one of the greatest aspects of manipulation. He who angers you controls you. So let's not forget, the news always control you through anger, because, right, so many freedoms that, well, kind of never existed in the first place are taken away. Teachers piss you off because, well, they've suffered their own life, right, through their own life. Now it's their turn to inflict suffering and ignorance upon you, right? Because, as I've been saying, narcissistic and sociopathic features, right? You've suffered, everyone else must suffer at least 1,000 times more, right? And it's never ever gonna be enough. And then, your parents piss you off because, well, many parents, like the majority of society, are still ignorant. So all these put, one near the other. Well, the point is that meaning is a very powerful tool against ignorance. And, well, so many of the words that once were innocent to use nowadays are, poisonous to so many people, and, so-called community guidelines that communities, well, first of all, communities barely exist, and most likely they haven't created any of these conducts, right? This is a little problematic, because people are using so much meaning against you, and, well, you are kind of swallowing that poison. All this being said, hopefully this little video has been introspective enough and, well, triggered a few points. You are appreciated. Take care. Ferenc Board signing out.